Horror outside Kabul airport after a suicide bomber ripped through desperate crowds. Horrific too for British troops on the other side of the gate who rushed forwards to help. Their commander recalled the moments the blast went off in the midst of British and American efforts to evacuate thousands of people.
It's carnage. When that level of explosion and combination of shrapnel is detonated, there is only one result, and that is carnage.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Brigadier James Martin was in charge of British ground troops on the evacuation mission. The officer said their reaction to the bombing was one of the finest things he'd ever seen.
They ran towards the explosion. They provided immediate medical succor and support to the Afghan civilians that had been wounded. They provided explosive ordnance disposal support to the Americans, and they provided a security perimeter so that the Americans could withdraw their wounded and their killed with dignity and under a screen of safety.
13 US service personnel were killed and more than 100 Afghans. But it could have been much worse, and the commander said it was largely serendipity British forces didn't die too.
The night before, we had done a clearance operation because we knew there was a threat out there in order to provide greater standoff between a potential vector from a suicide bomber and where we were dealing with the crowds of evacuees and our own soldiers. And I think it's fair to say, as a result of that, lives absolutely were saved.
The Brigadier said soldiers had shed tears because of what they saw during the 2-week evacuation. Scenes like this witnessed by Sky News' Stuart Ramsey, with children struggling in the heat. All the while, British troops having to work with the Taliban, a former foe, now this country's new rulers.
There was emotions all the way through the operations. You can't see a young child, a baby, a woman crushed to death in front of you, and then you having to deal with the aftermath of that and the corpse, or provide medical attention to a baby that's been struck by a 5mm ball bearing. You can't see any of that without being emotional.
Emotional too, no doubt, when the final troops left Afghanistan last week after evacuating more than 15,000 people. Courage and compassion, even as their 20-year war ended in retreat. Deborah Haynes, Sky News.